have a chance in death to help the Sontaran cause.
How can I do that?
Tell Dastari where your symbiotic nuclei is located in your cell structure. Vital time will be saved and I can be on my way.
Is that what Jacine has offered you? The knowledge of unlimited time travel? In that case, you shall watch your back, Stike.
What?
She's an androgum, a race to whom treachery is as natural as breathing. They're a bit like you Sultanas in that respect.
That is for the slur on my people.
And for that, I demand satisfaction.
You know that is impossible.
I am challenging you to a duel, Stike. That is traditional among Sultanas, is it not?
Oh, I would dearly love to kill you. But unfortunately, you are needed alive.
Release me, Stike. You are not only without honor, you're a coward as well.
As you are not a Sontaran, Doctor, you cannot impugn my honor.
Well, that didn't work, did it?
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with the magnificent, the brilliant, the sexy.
Hello, I'm Scott. Well, wonderful intro.
I'm drinking, so it's this week we are continuing our look through the two Doctors as we look into episode 2 with Mr. Colin Baker and Patrick Troughton. But before we jump straight in to the episode, we actually are going to be talking about something a little bit sensitive before we jump into the episode. There was an episode of Jim Will Fix It. So we're going to be talking about Jimmy Savile for the first chunk of this episode. I'm going to timestamp just in capital letters, like Jimmy Savile talk or something like that.
Yeah.
Just so, like, if you don't want to listen to us talk about this disgusting, horrible, awful, terrible person,
we're not
like,
specifically talking about Jimmy Savile, but we're tiptoeing
like
around the
something that
subject.
Yeah. You know, it's related to the show or whatever. So if you just don't want to hear like anybody talk about that human garbage anymore, just skip it. It's okay. But that's how we are opening this episode. What a fun, controversial, well, not really, way to open the episode. I'm going to hand it off to Scott because he knows more about what we're actually talking about than I do. So
yeah. So after this episode of Doctor aired, another episode with two Doctors and some Tyrants of Doctor Who aired inside of Jim's. It sounds wrong. Inside of Jimmy Savile, no. Inside of a TV show, Jim Will Fix It. It was a sketch, and if you haven't heard of Jim Will Fix It, basically it was a show where kids would write to Jimmy Savile, basically being like, oh yeah, I want to do this. And then in this case, it's a kid named Gareth who really wanted to travel with the Sixth Doctor, and that's where we have our little sketch called A Fix with Some Tyrants. This is the first time you've seen it. What did you think of the episode?
I thought it sucked. It was like, you know, it's only 10 minutes and it's barely a story. Like the Doctors on the TARDIS, Tegan shows up, then the kid shows up, then Sontarans show up. There's a little bit of a, haha, we're going to stop you, Sontarans. Then Jimmy Savile invades the TARDIS and the episode ends.
Yeah.
It's like whatever, like it's clearly just there to make the kids stay, and it's cool. Like, sure, that kid got to hang out with Colin Baker on set. It seems like he's having a good time. He's dressed up like Colin Baker. He's the only kid that likes Colin Baker as the Doctor. Like, this is like, let him celebrate. So I like for that part. That part's great. Good stuff. That's really good. The Jim stuff. Oh yeah. Boy.
Yeah. Yeah, so the kid is called Gareth. His nan made him a replica of the Sixth Doctor's costume, which is pretty fucking neat.
It's a
to be honest.
it's a good job. Yeah, it's a real accurate little.
It's a
homemade
great
costume.
job, especially considering Colin Baker only had like 4 episodes by the time she made this costume for her grandson. That's pretty impressive stuff.
That kid immediately fell in love with Colin Baker's Doctor.
Yeah. And yeah, it's a good costume, and believe it or not, this special feature is on the Blu-ray, which released last year. And
oh wow!
They do a wonderful job of cutting around the Jimmy Savile part, because inside of the actual sketch that aired on television, the Doctor, Tegan, and the young boy look at the TV monitor, and then Jimmy Savile's face appears, and the Doctor's like, "Oh my god, how horrifying!"
Yeah, it's hilarious.
Aged really well, that scene.
Yeah, that honestly, it made me laugh out loud. Like, Tegan goes, "It's a monster."
And then you just hear Jimmy Savile doing his weird noise, which was apparently a thing he did constantly. I'm not sure why he did that noise, but
It's one of Earth life's many mysteries.
so this is where on the Blu-ray it cuts out, instead of Jimmy Savile's face appearing, it's like a fleet of Sontaran battleships. And they have a new line from Colin Baker basically being like, "Oh my word, there's more of them." And then the episode ends, which is a great way of cutting around it.
Yeah, that's a much better way. And I honestly wish that was the version I watched, because the version I watched just made me really sad. So,
Yeah, Jimmy Savile basically jumps on board of the TARDIS, and they award the little boy with a medal around his neck, basically like the end of Star Wars.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy
It's
Savile kisses Janet Fielding on the hand, and it's really disturbing. I don't like that part.
Any scene with him in it is disturbing. But like, as far as like a little cute sketch goes, it does its job. Like, I don't see this really being any different than like the silly like children in need sketches or whatever that Doctor Who usually does. Like, it's fun. It's a nice little treat for the fan. It's much honest. Like, it reminds me a lot of the fan that won the Blue Peter competition and got to be that kid that got like completely murdered and mutilated, which is still hilarious to me, that you won a competition and you're like, this is the kid that won the competition, let's kill him on camera. Like,
so apparently Colin Baker had a rough time working with Jimmy Savile, not for the reasons you'd expect, but Colin Baker says Savile entered the set and did his usual self-congratulatory shtick. I didn't warm to him. His demeanor was neither friendly or inclusive. He behaved much as one might expect a child to behave who has been indulged and led to believe that their life evolved around them. Yeah, basically he was just acting like a child. He was a dickhead, which isn't surprising because he had a lot of disturbing power in terms of... he had a kid. He had a show where kids would write to him. And that was there's no easy way to talk about this.
No, I mean, he was a gross pedo. Like, he would take advantage of children. He had a whole wing of a hospital that he paid for and would routinely go in and assault people. Like, he was a disgusting person. And I really recommend Louis Theroux has got a really good documentary on Jimmy Savile. It's his second one specifically because he did a whole, back in the early 2000s or late 90s or whenever, he did a documentary with Jimmy Savile before any of the accusations and stuff had come out, and it was just him hanging out with Jimmy Savile, and you see him do a bunch of weird and creepy, awful things, but nobody is saying anything or making light of it being weird or anything. And then in this documentary, it came out a few years ago, it's basically Louis Theroux looking back at that old footage being like, how are we all idiots? How did nobody, like, it's so fucking obvious that like this guy isn't mega creep. Why did I not see this? Like, what was wrong with all of us that we would turn a blind eye to somebody behaving in this way?
It was a huge open secret. Like, you can see multiple clips of Jimmy Savile even alluding to it in like strong hints at it. It's like really disturbing how it continued for so long. Jim will Fix It lasted for 20 years, which is how many kids were on that show. It's depressing to think about. Moving on slightly to another abuse of power, although it's much better abuse of power, which sounds weird to say. So obviously Nicola Bryant wasn't involved with this mini episode because she was basically contracted to do a lot of stuff around this time because of her involvement with Doctor Who. She would have to open like ceremonies, charity appearances. She was even contracted to do Doctor in Distress, which came out like a year after this. So
iconic. That's iconic.
I'm excited to cover the next season of Doctor Who because it's Trial of the Time Lord, and we'll be talking about Doctor in Distress and shit like that because there's a lot of stuff to talk about with Doctor in Distress.
We haven't talked about Doctor in Distress, I think, since like the early, like first couple episodes of Doctor Who, and we would just go off on big rambly tangents because we didn't really have a structure to the show yet.
So Nicola Bryant was contracted to do a lot of things. One thing she said no to doing, which was again in her contract, was that John Nathan Turner did a lot of pantomimes like every year, and that was in her contract to do this pantomime. And she's like, no thank you, I don't want to do this pantomime because, you know, basically we're doing 18 hours a day on Doctor Who. I don't have time to rehearse for a pantomime.
Did you just say 80 hours a day?
18 hours a day, I said.
Okay, right.
But yeah, over the Christmas period of 1984, it was a production of Cinderella. A bunch of Doctor Who actors like Colin Baker, Mary Tam, who played Romana, Jacqueline Pierce, who plays the villain of this episode with Two Doctors, Nicola Bryant and Anthony Ainley, who played the Master. So basically, he's just using all his Doctor Who actors under contract, which
that's a fun side hustle. Like,
yeah. So basically,
I would have loved to go to a panto with the Doctor Who cast. Yeah, that would have been great. Like,
so basically, she says, "No, I don't want to do this pantomime," and John Nathan Turner turned around and said, "It was made very clear to her that saying no was not an option." So she was forced to do the panto in the end, and as an abuse of John Nathan Turner's power, he made sure that she wasn't in this sketch to prove to her that there needs to be no saying no in the future because this is what happens. This is your punishment that you can't do this little sketch here.
Your punishment is you don't get to work with Jimmy Savile.
Well, yeah, which in turn is a good thing because, you know, with all the things about Jimmy Savile,
that's a win. Yeah,
you know. That's an incredible abuse of power just to basically say, oh yeah, you have to do this, even though it's not even relevant to the show. But pantomime is nothing to do with the show. And it
is. I mean, like with anything, you know, there's two sides to every coin, and I can see where John Nathan Turner is coming from. Like, it is included in her contract that she signed and presumably her agent read and agreed to. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, she did agree to do this, whether or not, you know, she thought it was feasible. That's something she should have worked out in the negotiation part before she signed the goddamn contract. But on the other hand as well, like, come on, like, be reasonable. Yeah. You know, if somebody doesn't want to do it, is that an energy that you really want to bring to your pantomime? Like, you know, like, but yeah, I can see both sides of it. I think she got the better. Like, I would, like, oh, you had to do the pantomime. Oh, well, but you managed to avoid having to work with a massive creep, so.
Well, yeah, it's a good thing in the end, I guess. But it is a example of how much of a bully John Nathan Turner essentially was on the set of Doctor Who, you know. I'm sure as we go on with more John Nathan Turner episodes, we'll be talking about how much of a bully he is. He's not the best boss to have, I would say, but, you know, better than Jimmy Savile.
yeah, which is, I mean, most people are.
So Janet Fielding obviously replaces Nicola Bryant in this sketch because, according to John Nathan Turner, Janet doesn't say no.
Christ.
So yeah, obviously Janet Fielding was a companion to the Fifth Doctor. She worked with the Sixth Doctor in a sketch. She did the audition with the Seventh Doctor, Sylvester McCoy, and she was even the agent to the Eighth Doctor, Paul McGann. So she was involved with Doctor Who for a long time with all the Doctors. But yeah, what a terrible sketch.
It sucks, but like if I was that kid, remove the Jimmy Savile element, obviously. But if I was that kid, I would be having the best time of my goddamn life. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, on the Blu-ray commentary for this, obviously Jimmy Savile's involved, and we don't mention Jimmy Savile. But the kid is obviously a grown man now. He works with like a children's charity. He just adopted 2 kids. He says he had a wonderful time on set. Colin Baker was lovely. He even spoke to his sister, and we have nothing but good memories from the experience. I'm not sure what his feelings are on meeting Jimmy Savile because it's never mentioned in the commentary, but he had a good time at least meeting Colin Baker, which is all you could ask for. Colin Baker's a lovely man, so...
Yeah, I mean, we met him, and he was very funny.
He was,
very funny guy, yeah.
So, with that said, do you want to jump into another story with 2 doctors and some tyrants?
Well, I mean, it's barely got 2 doctors in it, this story, does it? Yes, let us continue our look through the 2 doctors as we begin episode 2.
I am not crotchety. I'm just, well, concerned.
What about?
About myself, chiefly. I mean, him. Languishing in some dark dungeon at the mercy of the Sontarans.
You can't be sure he's in a dungeon.
There was an echo, an after resonance. When you've been locked in as many dungeons as I have, you wouldn't fail to recognize it. Well, you ready?
For what?
Transference.
Now, my doctor wouldn't have done that.
Your doctor is an antediluvian fogey, allowing himself to be captured by the Sontarans. If anything happens to myself as a result of it, I will never forgive himself.
Oh, I do wish you'd stop switching personal pronouns. It'd make it a lot easier to understand what you're talking about.
Episode 2 begins where we left off with episode 1, with Perry being tackled to the ground by some mysterious stranger, while the Doctor gets knocked out by gas and hung up by cables. And this concludes in a way where you wouldn't expect. It's so compelling, and the things that it reveals are magnificent. And of course, by that I mean Perry shoves the guy off her, and he just kind of lays on the ground, and then she goes and wakes the Doctor up, and they're just like, that was a bit silly, wasn't it? Anyway, let's continue on. Cliffhangers continue to be the single worst part of classic Who.
I mean, technically, the cliffhanger itself is great. The image of the Doctor
the resolution.
There. Yes,
the resolution to the cliffhangers. Yes.
Apparently, while Colin Baker was up there, he pretended to be one of the flower pot men. Bill and Ben, flower pot men.
Yes.
But not the CGI ones. It was more of the puppet ones. Remember
the puppet ones are what I remember. That's the ones I remember.
You remember the
puppet
kid. Ones? You didn't watch the CBeebies 2002 show.
I would probably watch both, but I remember puppet ones. But that's just how I am.
Remember Andy Pandy? That was a good show as well.
Yes, Andy Pandy's a classic. Noddy, of course.
Yeah. Whatever weird
other really British weird cartoons out there.
Oh god.
Bill and Ben, Flower Pot Men, classic. But anyway, they discover that the unconscious man that tackled Perry is actually Jamie, who's been living in the pipes or whatever since the last time we saw him. There's kind of like this disconnect with Jamie, I find, because when we last see him, he's nothing like this, and I feel like maybe there's like a missing scene or something just got scrapped in the writing process, because when we last saw Jamie, he was talking to the cannibal dude, and then he managed to like sneak away weirdly when the cannibal guy just gets distracted by the other lady that comes up to him. And like we that's the last we see of Jamie until right now, when he's covered in all this like oil and dirt and stuff, and has been living in the pipes for who knows how long.
How long
Feels
do you
like
think
there's like a day. I think he's been really dramatic, and it's been one day,
or like an hour.
yeah.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you show what happened in between that scene and this scene, then it kind of ruins the cliffhanger in the last episode. You know, you don't know. The whole point is you don't know who it is, but if you
Then
follow
maybe
Jamie on his journey,
come up with a better cliffhanger.
maybe. But yeah, maybe he is being a bit over dramatic. I'm not sure why he's gone this insane.
Yeah, he's all weird. He's like barely being able to talk, and he's like, they killed the doctor. The doctor's dead.
I get it. He's essentially going through trauma. His best friend, aka his gay lover, just died, and now he has nowhere off of this. Yeah. Now he has nowhere to go because he's just on a spaceship or whatever. He has nowhere to go.
Yeah, he just has to live in the pipes. But there's some nice little effects here. The doctor stabs him in the neck with these like 2 needles, and it's like a false needle where the actual like sharp needle gets pushed into the device itself, so it gives the illusion of it going into the skin. But it works really well because there's like a suction on the actual like head of the needle itself, so when the doctor then later pulls it out, a bit of his skin gets pulled up with it, giving the illusion that it was in deep inside his neck, which I thought was just this really nice little touch.
Yeah, but suction on the head deep inside the neck.
Well, this is Jamie we are talking about. The doctor also hypnotizes him to make him fall asleep at some point, but instead of pulling a master and looking deep into his dreamy eyes, he pulls out a stopwatch in a classic sort of like magician way, where it's like, look, focus on the watch. Which I don't know. I don't really have any thoughts on hypnosis as an actual practice. I've never been hypnotized, nor do I think I actually believe in hypnosis.
Neither do I, to be honest. It comes across as science fiction to me. I understand it being as like a meditative kind of thing, but not in the sense of, oh yeah, you can control this other person, make them cluck like a chicken, you know?
Yeah, like make somebody so suggestible.
Yeah,
that they'll do whatever you say. Like I feel like they have to be in on it for it to actually work, and that's like the Darren Brown stuff. I'm always like, this is fiction, right? None of this is. You're lying to everybody, right?
I watched the Darren Brown because I studied psychology, and I watched the Darren Brown special where it's one where he robs a bank with these other people. Have you seen that one? It convinced me enough at the time that maybe it is real, but I'm not sure about it. It's an awful lot to believe in, to be honest.
I've seen a couple Darren Brown ones. The only one I really remember is he convinces a dude that the zombie apocalypse has happened, which was really funny. But yeah, that's.
Darren Brown did convince like millions of people, not millions of people, maybe like 1,000, maybe like 100 people that they're glued to their seat because he hypnotized the TV audience into believing they're stuck to a chair. Which, again, I don't buy it because most people are on their phones watching this shit, so...
It's that type of thing that I don't think I'm gonna ever believe unless it happens to me and I feel myself lose control of my own body. But at the same time, I don't think I'm somebody you could hypnotize because I'm too skeptical going into it. I feel like it's the type of thing you need to have like an open mind and a willingness to be a participant, whereas the whole time I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna prove you wrong right now. Like
I believe a doctor could hypnotize people because we've seen the master do it a billion times. I'm not sure why
it's
he's
a Time
using a
Lord ability.
stopwatch when using his eyes.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Also, if a doctor doesn't hypnotize much people, I think it'd be something he uses far more often to calm people down in certain situations.
Well, like for the doctor specifically, I would see that he doesn't use it because he doesn't want to abuse that power so much. You know, it would be this is a lifeline type of thing, whereas the master uses it to be like, I'm going to make you do what I want. Which the doctor could do if he wanted, but obviously he's not the villain of the show. But yeah, no, I believe it when it comes to the Doctor and the Master and stuff, because I mean they've got like very light psychic powers as far as anyways. So like, if I'm willing to believe that, I can believe that he could hypnotize somebody. But after they knock him out, they're then just like, okay, let's just leave him here on the floor and go explore somewhere else for a while, which is such a strange choice. Like, they don't just take him with him or leave or like sit with him until he wakes up. They're just like, he's fine here in the pipes.
Yeah, it just reminds me of that time in The Time Meddler, which we covered this year at the very start of the year, when I think it was Stephen who just leaves Vicky on the ground to potentially be attacked, well, more than attacked by the Vikings.
Yeah. There's some weird blocking at times when it comes to Classic Who, isn't it? Where it's like, we want these characters to be here, and we're just going to be like, we'll come back to this later. But we then cut away to two of the worst characters in this story, or maybe possibly two just the worst characters, full stop, in this story. No maybe about it. As it's weird guy that likes to kill moths and his strange girlfriend walking through the Spanish fields, and they're like, should we have done something? Did we even see what we thought we saw? Is any of this real? And then like he starts going on about how like he's not well. He's like ill, but he's like a weird like actor guy. He's like a famous dude because he talks about how he needs to have a star on his door.
Yeah, he wants to be famous, I think, because the thing he's saying.
Yeah.
And then the girl's like, "Oh yeah, you can be the hero of this scenario, and you can be famous that way." And it's like, yeah, I'm not very interested in these characters because it's very 1980s. Two bumbling idiots kind of stumble on like an alien invasion storyline in a way. We're just not.
But it's not as fun as that. Like that. No. That's at least like a fun. Like it's just these two. These just suck. They just suck. Like especially like they feel different than they did in the last episode. Like in the last episode, like, yeah, he was a bit poetic and weird about moths, but he didn't come across as this dude seeking fame and glory and to be this artiste or whatever. And then in this one, he's like, they're both talking really strange and acting way more over the top. Like, I feel like their performance is worse in this episode.
It's interesting. It's interesting you say that, because the scene from the last episode was supposed to be part of this episode, but the last episode underran, so they just shifted scenes around. So this is part of the same scene, essentially, is what I'm saying.
Their writing in this episode, then, is a big problem.
Yeah.
Which is true, because I think there's only really one good scene in this entire episode, so...
Now you can see, I think you're beginning to see why I forgot about this episode as a kid, because I wasn't interested the first time I watched this.
Yeah.
Episode 3 might be the best part because of how wacky it is. It's like the weirdest episode. I'm looking forward to covering episode 3, but episode 2 is just nothing.
Episode 2 really is just nothing. But that nothing does subside for a short moment as we get an actual interesting shot in Doctor Who, which is always fun when it happens in Classic Who. We had a heap of it in Caves of Androzani, and this is the only example of it so far in this story, where the Doctor and Perry come walking into a room, and it looks like it's a very nice wide shot as they're coming in through it, but then it pans to reveal actually it was a mirror reflection shot, and they're actually close up here in this close shot. It's very much like a student film type of camera angle. Like this is like cinematography 101. This is every student film has ever done this shot all the time, because mirrors are fun to mess with a camera. It looks cool. Like,
yeah, the first time I rewatched this episode for a podcast, I thought it was a great shot, but then I thought, oh my god, it gets ruined by the music kind of twinkles when the camera moves, if you know what I mean.
It's like, look at the magic.
Yeah. But, you know, it's to indicate that the mirror is an important part of the episode, because in 5 minutes we'll find out it's essentially a way for them to project the image into the little tube later on, or whatever is happening there.
But this scene goes on as the Doctor explains who Sontarans are and what they're like and exactly what it is they're planning on doing. And it comes across, it's still kind of vague what the Sontarans' actual plan is. It's basically they're just going to kill the Doctor or something, but they haven't quite killed him yet. And the Doctor then convinces himself that maybe his past self is dead already, and that they're just in like this weird time bubble that's going to slowly just close in on itself and then pop.
Yeah, I think the Doctor has a
says,
line of saying, "Oh yeah, it's gonna be another century before everything crumbles," and Perry's like, "Oh, century? We've got plenty of time."
Yeah,
then.
fine then, whatever. We'll just keep going.
And of course, the Doctor does mention the long feud between the Sontarans and the Rutans, which they don't really get mentioned in Modern Who that much. Like the last time we saw the Rutans. Sorry,
have we seen the Rutans in Modern Who?
Not in Modern Who, but in Classic Who, in the Horror of Fang Rock, but not in any episode of with the Sontarans in it. Interestingly enough, so it might be a fun episode to see the Rutans come back and fight against the Sontarans. But
well, I am not familiar with who the Rutans are at all, or even what they look like. So it would be a fascinating time for me, especially if they came back in Modern Who. That would be something interesting, especially something interesting for the Sontarans that I feel like haven't done anything interesting ever in New Who. Like, the ones
they apparently appeared in a Matt Smith video game called I think it's the Gunpowder Plot.
Well, I've not played that video game, so Rutans Doctor Who. Oh,
yeah, but very essentially like jellyfish. When you search Rutans Doctor Who, you get 2 images of
they are
Who,
jellyfish.
I mean, all the images are from that video game I just mentioned, basically.
Yeah, where it's like a really, really bad graphic 11th Doctor. Yeah.
We should figure out a way how to play that someday. I remember playing the first one. It was okay. It's just my laptop wasn't powerful enough to play the game. So.
They appear in the comics quite a bit, apparently, as well, it seems. But yeah, I think nowadays we have the budget to do a proper jellyfish enemy. With Doctor Who, and it would be an interesting twist on the Sontarans and flesh them out a bit more, because right now Sontarans in Modern Who are weird potato men that worked with that genius kid in that OK episode from season 4. They're Strax, who's the best Sontaran that's ever lived he's great. I
just sent you an image of 2 action figures of a Sontaran and a Rutan, and they look terrible.
They do look terrible, you're right. But, I mean, you can update them. And then, obviously, of course, there was the Sontarans in Flux that were doing something, and then they really liked chocolate. So there's lots of room with the Sontarans that you can improve on. Because I feel like they're a Doctor Who... they're a classic Doctor Who... Like, one of the iconic villains in Doctor Who.
A Sontaran pops up in Sarah Jane Adventures twice, just after the events of the Series 4 episodes. So it's like a semi-sequel to that.
They're up there with Daleks and Cybermen. Even in this episode, they compared. They're like, they're third place after the Daleks and Cybermen is basically what they say in this episode. Which nowadays, Weeping Angels kind of get thrown in there as well. Maybe I don't know what other class the Ice Warriors. I think
the Master, of course, is number one.
The Master, yeah.
I would say
then
a hot take here, but out of the big 3, I think we're all wasted. between this Daleks, Cybermen, and Sontarans. It depends on the writer. You need a really good writer, because essentially their goal is just one note. With the Daleks, they want to destroy all life that isn't like them. With the Cybermen, they want to convert people into them. And with the Sontarans, it's just war, war, war. So they've only got one goal in their mind, which is a problem for this episode, because we don't really do much in this episode apart from... they have a line. It's either in this episode or it's in the last episode. I think it's this episode where they have a line where it's like, the Sontarans don't seem to be doing much right now, so we should be able to get away with it. It's ridiculous, but the Daleks have been done to death in Modern Who, where it's really hard to come up with new ideas with them. The Cybermen have been through so many iterations, they just basically don't make sense in New Who anymore. And the Sontarans haven't been explored. I would be interested to see a cool Sontaran story. Again, I said it last week, but the best Sontaran story I've ever listened to is the Ninth Doctor Sontaran story, where it's a planet of Sontarans who aren't introduced to the concept of war. It was so cool. I loved that story so much. You need to do like a special twist on something like this, because again, it's just a one-note villain. You need a bit more nuance into this story, I think. But
yeah, you need to be like flesh them out in a way, and that adding in the weird octopus monsters, enemies to them. Like if you flesh out who they are and what their goal is and what their world is, why are they at war? Why are they the enemies of the Sontarans? Like you could flesh out, and you could have a whole big cool universe here. And like that's, I think, one of the issues Doctor Who always runs into is that we have this amazing cast of villains, but their goal always is, I'm going to destroy the Earth or kill the Doctor, or both. And that's it. That's all we know about them. We never really dive into their motives or why they're wanting to do it. The most we know about is the Master, where it's like, they were best friends and then he went insane and all this happened. And that's great. That's cool stuff. I want some more depth to some Doctor Who villains. That'd be really cool.
Yeah, hopefully Series 14 introduces more depth, because I think, we need some more depth after the Chibnall era.
14 seasons. Yeah, and that's not saying that like some of the villains are shallow, because there are some great stories and some great arcs when it comes into Doctor Who and Modern Who as well. It's just like, if you compare it to other great sci-fi products like Star Trek or Star Wars or another sci-fi show.
The Oracle.
Yeah, sure. Like those are shows and universes where the aliens all have worlds. They all have politics. They all have cultures. They all have meaning and everything behind them. Like you understand where everybody's coming from, even if it's on like a basic, like almost surface level. They all have this history to them, and like the Sontarans kind of have that, where it's like they're a bunch of cloned people that are constantly looking for war, and they're just barbarians, which makes them probably closest to like the Klingons from Star Trek, where they are this warrior race that are always looking for war. But the Klingons change and grow throughout the entire timeline of Star Trek. They form alliances with people, they break up, they change leaders, they're constantly evolving and becoming more dynamic, whereas the Sontarans are still that one note potato men. Let's just add some depth. That'd be cool.
I mean, even when you move away from Sontarans being the villain, it's just comic relief man who doesn't get much depth apart from he can't understand genders. Yeah, I feel like there's some missed opportunities. There's some open goals that you could flesh into with Doctor Who. But anyway, the episode continues as Perry's like, I'm gonna go see Jamie because we just left him away in that tube, and I'm gonna see if he's still alive. And then when she goes away, suddenly she's screaming inside a tube and she's dying, which genuinely made me jump. I wasn't expecting it when I first watched it. I was like, oh, crap, what's happening? And it turns out nothing's really happening. The Doctor starts flicking through. It's like a projection screen. Yeah. And like he sees the second Doctor, he sees himself, he sees Dastari all screaming inside this thing. And then Perry comes back with Jamie. They quickly explain who the Doctor is to Jamie, and he's okay with it. And the Doctor's like, oh, I don't think I'm dead anymore. I think this thing is like projecting images from like my life or something, and it got you, Perry, because you were in the mirror or in the reflection or something. Don't worry about it. It doesn't really make sense, but you're there. Oh yeah, earlier on there was a line where the Doctor does something. I can't remember what it is now. And then the Doctor's like, oh, I'll explain later, which is of course a big thing.
Classic. Yes.
Big thing that Stephen Moffat borrowed in his era. He famously did it in The Curse of Fatal Death. I'll explain it later.
It's hilarious. I'll explain this later. Yes, it was hilarious.
Fraser Hines came up with a line. Give me a second.
He came up with that line. He came up with the line. Give me a second.
So Colin Baker's explaining what's going on here, and Colin Baker's like, I am another aspect of him, just as he is of me. Mm-hmm. And then Fraser Hines is like, who will I be then?
Oh yeah. Who am I? Like,
so that's a Fraser Hines line. He's a very funny man, that Fraser Hines.
He is. I really like Jamie. I think he's one of my favorite Classic Who companions for sure. He's one that stands out from the crowd and is like genuinely memorable. Because we've had a few classic Who companions where if I was to see them again, I would ask, who are they? But Jamie, I remember, and Jamie, I like. He's up there with.
Remember
as one of my
when
favorites.
Victoria came back in Dimensions in Time, and she was like, "Who was that terrible woman?"
I remember Dimensions in Time so much because I saw it 3 times. God
God knows why he did that.
Yeah, it's brutal. But it's so we talked about it in our Dimensions in Time episode, so I won't talk about it too much here. But it is incredibly paced. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's garbage, but it does not feel like 20 minutes. Like, it feels like 5. Like, that thing flies by.
Yeah.
Like, but anyway, the Doctor says that to figure out what's going on, he needs to enter the astral plane and basically like meditate for a while. And Perry's like, how long is that going to take? He's like, I don't know. Time doesn't exist in the astral plane, which is a true fact. If you know what I'm talking about, you should be in jail. But and then the episode continues.
You know what the astral plane reminds me of?
What?
Give me a second. I need to send you something.
You should have this loaded up before you make your joke.
Oh, the GIF isn't working, but you know what it is.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Give me a second. You can insert this clip into the episode if you want. This is from
Beautiful.
Kingdom Hearts, where Winnie the Pooh leaves his body.
Leaves it. Yeah, it's a classic moment. And it's turned into a mainstream meme.
Yeah.
It's one of the... I think it's maybe the only mainstream Kingdom Hearts meme. Like...
Maybe.
I can't think of anything else from Kingdom Hearts that broke into the mainstream memes.
Maybe the speech that Woody gives in Kingdom Hearts 3 where he turns really anime. Where he like
but like I feel like I feel like that was like a flash in the pan, whereas I still see memes with Winnie the Pooh. And it's been years since Kingdom Hearts 3 came out, you know.
I don't remember what happened in the scene even for Winnie the Pooh to leave his body. What happened?
I think
Explain the plot
is
of
it from
Kingdom Hearts to me.
Is it from Kingdom Hearts 2?
Maybe.
One?
It looks like it.
Because I don't remember Winnie the Pooh in Kingdom Hearts 3. So I feel like it's Kingdom Hearts 2. And to answer you why this is happening, I will have to say I don't know, because I actively avoided doing any of the Winnie the Pooh stuff in the Kingdom Hearts games. Because whenever it would load up, I would feel like I was playing a toddler game and I wanted to turn it off. So I just was like, I'm not going to do that stuff.
I mean, you're playing Kingdom Hearts. You're expecting a toddler game, but when it turns into like the biggest anime thing of all time.
Yeah, it does.
Weird
and like that stuff I'm okay with, but the Winnie the Pooh stuff was a step too far. I couldn't deal with that. We continue on as we cut to the second Doctor, who's asleep on like a table, and Dastari and the Androgum people are there. And they're just like, oh, look, we have the second Doctor who's kind of like, oh my God, you've drugged me. What's going on? And he's kind of out of it. But we quickly cut away again.
Well, I have good news for you, or anybody who's watching this episode. If you really love watching Patrick Troughton lie on a table, then good news, because he's here in his table for the entire episode.
This is the episode for you. This is
but
what you.
Yet,
this is.
His performance is so much more captivating than, William Hartnell is in most episodes where he's lying down on a table or sitting down on a chair,
I think Patrick Troughton is better in this episode than everybody else.
Yeah.
I think he's giving a better performance than Colin Baker. I think he's better than Perry and Jamie.
Hines,
I think he's better. Yeah, Fraser Hines. I think he's better than Dastari. I think he's better than the Androgums. I think the only people whose performance comes close is the Sontarans, but that's just because their costume is so emotive and captivating.
But yeah, Patrick Troughton does do a remarkable job, considering he can't really use his body to emote for most of the episode. So he's giving a great performance under these restraints, literal restraints.
He is. And like my favorite bit with him happens much later on in the episode when he's just yelling, but he is genuinely captivating in this episode. Like he's giving a performance like I have not seen him give before. We've not covered that many Second Doctor episodes, and whenever we have, he's always been consistently great. But this, I've never seen him act like this. And I think he is a standout performance in this episode for sure. He's incredible.
This is technically our 4th episode with the second Doctor.
The
sorry.
7th. Wow, yeah.
Spoilers: he gets recast as a 7th Doctor somehow. Oh yeah, remember his performance in Dimensions in Time when he's just a floating CGI head?
Captivating, honestly. He's really good in this episode, but nothing is happening quite yet for the largest chunk of this story. And nothing continues to happen as Colin Baker gets a boner, because he's asleep in the astral plane, and he's kind of panicking or whatnot, and Jamie and Perry come over to him to be like, "Doctor, are you okay? What's going on?" And he wakes up, and then he goes, "A boing!" And starts hopping up, and he keeps repeating, he keeps saying boing like a comical amount, and it's like the only time I've heard somebody say boing is like making a joke to a boner. Like I've never heard somebody say it.
Well, he does say Jamie before he wakes up.
He does. He goes Jamie, and then he's like, "Oh boing." He was like, it's sex. He's wanting to have sex with Jamie again.
It's a sex.
But it's really stupid, and he starts running around, and then like Perry and Jamie are like, "Where are we going?" And he's like, "Oh wait, I can't quite remember. Something to do with me getting a haircut or something." He's feeling very doctorish, which I really like with Colin Baker. Is he does feel like the Doctor whenever he's performing. It's just I'm not engaged in what is happening because there's no plot progression in like 90% of this story of this episode.
But this is a common thing in Doctor Who, but we're just waiting around for them to discover what we already know is happening in the story, basically. We spent the first 5 minutes recapping what happened last week to Fraser Hines. Fraser Hines was recapping to the Doctor, what the second Doctor got up to, and now we're just trying to connect the dots and connect the sixth Doctor to a second Doctor. It's not engaging because he's just, again, Colin Baker just lying on a table going boing. Fascinating.
It's also the strangest thing with this episode is, this is like a 3-part story. There's 3 episodes, and in the first 2 episodes, the 2 Doctors don't meet at all. Like, they have no interaction together, which, I was praising it last week where I was like, I kind of like it that, they did a whole episode. I wasn't expecting them to not meet in this episode as well.
Yeah. It is. How long did it take in the 3 Doctors? Because that's a story we've covered. I think it took the second episode they meet, or the end of the first one.
Yeah, it happens really quick, and there's loads of scenes where they're together. Yeah, well, I mean, there's loads of scenes with Patrick Troughton and John Pertwee. William Hartnell, he pops in every now and then. But
spoilers, a little spoiler warning. I won't say what happens to a second Doctor, but essentially, there's a long chunk of the next episode where the second Doctor isn't around. So, so it's an interesting thing that the last multi-Doctor story of the era and the last second Doctor story we have, Patrick Troughton's not in it much. He's not playing the Doctor much, which is weird.
It is very strange.
Although I'm not sure if I love what happens next week or if I just want to love what happens next week, because it gets interesting. We'll find out.
Yeah, I've not actually sat down to watch it yet, so I have no idea what to expect. But we then cut away from the Doctor saying boing back to Patrick Troughton being asleep on a table. And this time I was like, oh, maybe we're going to get some interesting plot stuff happening. But no, we just retread over what an androgum is and how this lady isn't an actual androgum. She's an androgum with augmentation to her. And then we see what the actual androgum dude does, the cannibal dude, as he picks up a rat and eats it. And he's like, rats are tasty if you smoke them. It's a garbage scene and I hate it.
Oh yeah, and you won't believe how much complaints we've got on. It's a dark scene. It's 5:20 in the afternoon. Kids are settled down in front of their TV, eating tea, watching Doctor Who, and then Jimmy Savile. Nothing wrong with that. It's a nice, entertaining evening.
Fun for the whole family.
But yeah, people wrote in and complained it was too graphic to see on a kids show at 5:20 p.m. It was considered unimportant to the plot and characterization. Many people at the time thought the darkness of the cannibalism plot as a whole was part of the reason the show got placed on an 18-month hiatus, because Doctor Who was basically on the cards right around then, and when you get so many complaints from viewers, it makes sense that the BBC would go, maybe we'll put it on hold, maybe we'll come back next year and we'll have a lighter tone to things, we need to rework Doctor Who. And, like 5 days after this episode airs, it gets announced that the show's on a hiatus. So I think that's part of the reason why it's too dark. We talked about in Attack of the Cybermen, it was too violent, if you go back to that episode. So yeah, Doctor Who is just on the cards here. It's a sad thing that happened during Colin Baker's first ever season.
Yeah, it's like a mix of like just bad timing and bad luck with Colin Baker, because I don't think he's the problem.
Certainly
at all
not.
with his era. Like the problem comes from the production and the writing. And I like that scene. I totally get why people would complain. One, like I don't ever understand why people would complain, because it's television. Why are you complaining? Like, we have this whole thing in the UK with Ofcom, and we've talked about this before many episodes ago on the show. As one of the earliest conversations I think we had on the podcast was actually about Ofcom and how we think it's kind of stupid, and the people that actually complain to Ofcom are creepy people.
Do you know who the head of Ofcom is right now?
I couldn't tell you if you paid me.
I could be wrong, but it's a guy named Michael Grade, who is a man who cancelled Doctor Who 5 days from here. So, he's a guy who was the head of BBC One at the time, and he hated Doctor Who. And now he's the head of Ofcom, which is fascinating. He's a big Tory as well, so great.
Oh, things. Good. That's who you want to be in charge of censorship, I think. But yeah, no, Ofcom is... It's basically the censor board of the UK. They deal with the public complaints for the television and enforce like controls and stuff on programming. And I see the purpose for them. I can understand the reasoning behind them, but I think if any, like, I never in my life have watched something and thought I need to complain to Ofcom about it.
Yeah,
and some of the shows that you watch that get Ofcom complaints.
Yeah. I think the only time I've complained to Ofcom is quite recently, the channel GB News, which is essentially like a fake news network, and they spread like fear-mongering and transphobia and shit. I wrote in and complained about some transphobia that went on, because it was like an online petition kind of thing, and I think that did get investigated in the end. That's the only thing I've complained to Ofcom about, transphobia, so which is valid, I think.
Yeah, and that's using the service for good.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I think it's a good thing. Like, it's one of those things that I'm kind of torn on. If they were to say, like, we're getting rid of Ofcom, I don't think I would complain.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not going to complain that it's here, because it does have its uses, and it is, it has its purpose. But yeah, it's a system that can be easily abused at the same time,
Yeah, and having a Tory at the head of Ofcom is not a good thing, and
having the Tory at the head of anything
True.
is never a good thing.
Well, great country. Good job.
Yeah, we're so good. What a fun island. But we then cut away to the Doctor, Colin Baker's Doctor, that is, in the TARDIS as Jamie comes out, like, dressed weirdly formally. Like, he comes out with his, like, kilt and, like, shirt and stuff, but he's also got, like, the I don't even know the official term for it. But it's like this, like thing that goes over your shoulder and down your down your, like, chest and stuff. And it just looks like a hassle. Like the whole time, like Jamie's like fighting and trying to hold it and keep it in place. It's like, why would you put that on? Why would you dress like you're going to a funeral or a wedding?
Especially when he's just about to walk in to like 40-degree weather in Spain.
Yeah.
Why is he wearing so many layers?
Yeah, like the kilt I get because you want it to be a bit breezy, you know, you get that nice bit of airflow. But yeah, why would you dress in a full suit? What are you doing, Jamie?
You know, the doctor undresses for a scene in a bit. So.
Exactly. Yeah, he wears his summer garb.
Yeah.
But they continue talking. They have a bit of an argument about the second Doctor. Again, it's a kind of a nothing scene where the Doctor's just like, I'm going to use the TARDIS. This is also where time travel doesn't make sense because he's like, the Sontarans are on this place in like 10 days and they've been there for 10 days and they've been attacking and they're doing this. And it's like, but you have a time machine. Why don't you just go 10 days before they arrived and set up a trap and then capture? Like, why do you need to arrive after they've already been there? Like, that doesn't.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what episode it was, but it was an episode we covered before where we questioned the same thing. Like, there's a scene inside of a TARDIS, I think it was, where they say the time's running out, and I'm like, I think it might have been Attack of the Cybermen, which opens this season. There's a scene where the Doctor's like, oh yeah, we're running out of time, we need to get to this place. And I'm just sitting there like, you have a time machine. You can't run out of time in a time machine. How does that work?
Yeah. Yeah, it might have been that. I honestly don't remember because I feel like we've said it more than once.
Probably, yeah.
Especially in Classic Who, where they just kind of sometimes forget conveniently that they have a time machine that could solve a lot of their problems. But that's the issue with time travel, isn't it? Is sometimes it's too easy to get around the actual issue that you've got. But anyway, we cut away then to Patrick Troughton waking up after being drugged. And he's talking to everybody and he's shouting at them and he's fantastic. Yeah. He is fantastic in this scene. He's superb and he's just catching up on everything that's happening. Like, you know, where's Jamie? Is Jamie dead? Oh my god, the Sontarans are here. I was at the space station. What's going on? Like, as far as content goes, it's not a useful scene in the plot, which is a recurring theme of the episode. But performance, good.
This might be the first scene where we have the two Sontarans standing next to each other, and there's an obvious height difference. Like, they are, like, one's maybe like half a foot shorter than the other or something. It's insane that these two people got cast as Sontarans.
Not even the height difference, like the facial difference. The masks don't look the same. Like, it's the use of Sontarans in this episode is absolutely shocking. It's like they forgot every single thing that actually makes a Sontaran a Sontaran.
So some talk about the Sontarans. I think one of the Sontarans is like a 60-year-old man. The other Sontaran is a 20-year-old man. So the 20-year-old man arrived back from Spain with dyed hair and a tan, and Colin Baker was like, oh my god, the makeup artist is going to get so mad with you. You can't change your clothes like that. And then the guy went to the makeup artist and like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, I changed my hair. I don't know what to do. I mean, the makeup artist is like, your head's going to be covered, so it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah, you're wearing a mask.
so yeah,
I have to think that's Colin Baker ribbing the dude. Like, that 100%. Has to just be Colin. Yeah. like the dude just didn't catch on to the fact that, oh my god, my head's going to be covered anyways. It doesn't matter. This younger guy got cast because he wrote in a letter saying, why did you cast Nicola Bryant? She just got out of acting school. If you want somebody out of acting school, why not cast me? And John Nathan Turner found this letter funny, and then he's like, why not join on to the show as a Sontaran or something? Brilliant.
I think the letter kind of reeks of like maybe misogyny, to be honest.
Yeah. I wish I could send a letter to Russell T Davies being like, I'm also from Scotland, like Shooty Gatwa, so why don't you put me in Doctor Who? And
Yeah.
then he would just be like, "You're right. That's great logic. Here you go."
It's very strange, but on the plane, apparently, he got the seat right next to Patrick Troughton, his childhood hero, essentially, which was a great
That'd be
flight
cool.
with him because Patrick Troughton gave him a little talk about his performance and was like, yeah, just act your heart out, and just basically gave him a good little talk and gave him confidence about his shoot, basically. One thing about Nicola Bryant I forgot to mention earlier on is, again, I wouldn't say it's an abuse of power, but essentially John Nathan Turner told Nicola Bryant to keep secret that she had a husband at the time, which, again, it's
Weird. Yeah.
again, it's kind of, the character is kind of for the dads. She's in these kind of costumes every episode, so make the dads at
Make her
home
seem
kind
available.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
And also in interviews, she had to keep the American accent on, even though she was British, which
And even though it's not a good American accent.
it's so weird. John Nathan Turner did a lot for the show, but he just gives me a weird icky vibes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. There's a lot of weird decision making on his part, especially in this era of Doctor Who. He's just making weird choices left and right. But yeah, it's like impossible to guess like what would happen if it was given to somebody else at this time, because it's like that's just pure speculation at that point. And he did keep the show alive as long as he could. He did some good things, but I think with anybody that's running a show like Doctor Who in the 80s, there's going to be like, why are you like this?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, he was on the show for a decade, and there's like a million stories. Like the first classic Who episode we did, I told the story of the fact, I think it was Revelation of the Daleks, whatever Dalek episode the Fifth Doctor one is. And on the set, the director spoke with the script editor or the script writer of the episode.
oh my
and was
god,
like,
yeah, I remember this.
Yeah, he was like, okay, how did you plan this in your head? How did you plan this shot in your head? And then John Nathan Turner kind of walked up to them and just was furious that the director was speaking to the script writer. And like, I think he banned the script writer off of the set, which is fucking mental to think about.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I'm sure. Like he was like John Nathan Turner had some good ideas, and he clearly was like at least semi-decent at his job because he kept the show running for 10 years. Like I would say that he's probably pretty great at his job, but like a personal professional relationship with the man seemed to be a very difficult thing to maintain.
A very controversial figure in Doctor Who, probably like one of the most hated showrunners essentially, and again, he got basically death threats when he did Dimensions in Time, which again is something that's still continuing to this day because the Yellow Jackets showrunners just got death threats because of the final that aired just last week.
Jesus Christ, did they really?
Yes, we did.
Did they? Oh my fucking god!
It's unbelievable. It's just sickening.
I don't understand anybody that sends a death threat over a TV show. Like
Exactly.
I cannot understand that logic at all. I'm gonna kill you. You made a decision that I don't know anything about. How dare you?
It's shocking.
It is dumb. As well as being a showrunner in Doctor Who, as much as it's like a dream job, it's also like a nightmare because there's no pleasing.
Exactly.
No pleasing everybody. Like John Nathan Turner got complained about all the time. Russell T Davies, people nowadays are like, oh my god, he's so great. Guarantee you people complained about him.
Oh yeah,
way back in 2006.
Classic Doctor Who fans complained about
Yeah.
Russell T Davies because of the whole relationship between the Doctor and Rose.
all
It
the
was-
kissing,
it was Too much kissing, too much action. Not enough padding the plot.
Yeah. Moffat, very famously, I remember so much of being on the internet and having everybody hate Moffat and me being like, what are you on about? He's so great. Because I was a big defender of Moffat and I still am. He made some, he definitely made some mistakes and made some choices, but I think his era of Doctor Who's amazing. And obviously Chibnall goes without saying.
we struggle with the Chibnall era, but the guy's a decent human being. He doesn't deserve any hate himself. I just don't like his era. I don't like much of his writing. So
there's a difference between the work somebody produces and who that person is on a regular human level. You know, like, just because I don't think you wrote a good episode doesn't mean I think your existence on the planet needs to end.
I'm grateful that Chris Chibnall didn't go on Twitter or anything to sign up for a Twitter account, because the amount of death threats he would have gotten for just simply casting a woman as the Doctor, or a brown lady as a companion, or a black man as a companion,
or a black woman as the Doctor,
or a brown person as the Master, you know.
yeah.
Good Lord.
People are gross and awful, but you know, we just gotta hope that it's just a loud minority of people, and kind of filter it out. It's the downside when it comes to any sort of internet thing, is people, you know, just get into groups, and then those groups seem bigger than they actually are. You know, it's like, you know, you go back before the internet's around, you've got maybe 5 people in a village, or not even, you got one person in a village who's like, oh my god, I hated that show, I want to go and send a death threat to that person. How dare they make that decision? But they've got no traction because they're one person in a village, and everybody's like, shut up, you're an insane person, stop doing what you're doing. But then now with the internet, that one person in a village can find every other person in every other village that's also an insane person like they are, and they can form a community of insane people. It's great. It's really cool. The internet was a really good choice.
I mean, you know, Twitter over the last year, every day I'm on Twitter, it's like more and more of the negativity is in my feed. It's like I can't escape any kind of negativity. It's so bizarre.
I don't use Twitter anymore.
I don't
like. I have the app on my phone still, but I'm really close to just uninstalling it. Like, it is just like, I haven't gone on it in so long. Everything I hear about it makes me want it just go away. At this point, Reddit is my main social media app, you know, like Reddit's great. I like Reddit for the most part. Every now and then I see a dead body, but I can deal with that. I've seen worse. But anyway, the episode continues as we cut to the boring moth people in Spain as they see the TARDIS come up, and they're like, oh my god, the police, nice, we can just talk to them and deal with it. And Colin Baker comes out dressed ready for summer. Which is, I really like his outfit here. He's got like a waistcoat with a bunch of different colors and stuff on it. He looks pretty snazzy.
Which again, we were just talking about John Nathan Turner, but John Nathan Turner was famous for like very loud Hawaiian kind of shirts like this. So again, brilliant. John Nathan. But I do like this costume on Colin Baker. It fits his personality perfectly because it's obviously a very loud vest he's wearing. And it just really works for him. I wish we could see more variants like this in the costume. But another thing about John Nathan Turner is he really liked his uniforms. He didn't like even companions changing clothes that much. Like Perry is like the one companion who changes clothes in his era.
Yeah, she's barely got any clothes to begin with. But yeah, this scene is again a nothing scene where the Doctor meets these people and he's like, "Can you take us to the Sontarans?" And they go, "I guess," and then they take them away. That's everything that happens in this scene, except it's way more drawn out and way worse.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a lot of comedy between the Doctor and Oscar here, but none of it is landing with me. Maybe if I was like, maybe if I was watching this 40 years ago, maybe it would work, but probably not.
If you'd never heard of a joke before, maybe you might giggle. But then we cut to a genuinely very good scene with Patrick Troughton and Dastardi as he wheels in like this weird device thing, and the Doctor's like, that's never going to work on anything, like, what are you doing bringing that in? And that guy, and Dastardi's like, oh no, it's going to work, don't worry, it worked last time, it's going to work this time. You're in for a bad time right now, it's going to be awful for you. And this leads to just Patrick Troughton like yelling at him, and the two of them having a like back and forth about like androgums. Again, like the Doctor hates androgums, which even in this episode extends to Colin Baker hating androgums, which I said my piece about last week. I had a big problem with it.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense to me still, especially like Colin Baker, I think in this episode specifically calls them like savages or something like that,
Yeah.
which to me is like, oh Jesus Christ, this is some 80s writing. Like I'll look at native people as being like savages, and just the idea of a savage in general. It seems like a really outdated way of viewing civilization of people.
I do wonder if this is just Robert Holmes like venting his frustration at meat eaters. I don't know, but
This episode gets really on the nose with it. I
Yeah.
thought as well a little bit later.
but you know, he could have written that line like, they're savages, and you at home are also meat eaters, and you're the savages. Why not get into vegetarianism? Apparently, interestingly enough, Patrick Troughton was kind of a vegetarian, but he would only eat meat when it's the animal that he thinks he could easily kill. So he would only eat chickens and fish.
I'm only going to eat an animal that I could beat up in a fight. Like,
But it's like he was thinking, if I was in an extreme scenario like Yellow Jackets, for example, is what Patrick Troughton said.
that's a fair enough way of looking at it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, you could look at it as like, you know, maybe like if you found yourself in a situation where you had to kill that animal, then you could justify with eating it, but you don't need to eat it while it's alive, and you know, while it's getting mass produced and murdered on these huge farms. Like you could just be like, oh, I could kill that thing, but I don't need to kill that thing, so I'm going to eat something else.
Yeah, but it is an interesting approach that I haven't heard of before. Oh yeah, I could easily kill that animal, so I'm going to eat it. I don't feel bad about it. But if I looked a cow in the eye, then I'd feel terrible because that cow has emotion.
That cow could beat me up, and that means I can't eat it.
That's what Colin Baker says in the audio commentary, at least. But Colin Baker's like, oh yeah, I could eat anything, so I'm fine. And you know, Colin Baker's a big dude, so I buy it from him. I could eat anything as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've eaten, like, I'm a vegetarian. I've been a vegetarian for 7 years now. And I have no real plans on stopping being a vegetarian anytime soon. But before I was a vegetarian, I ate all sorts of meat. I've eaten everything. I've eaten loads. I was a big fan of eating different foods and experimenting with my palate, and you know, just seeing what there is to taste. But you know, since you stop I feel like when you stop eating meat, you become more aware of where it comes from, and it's not so much. I don't really have an issue with consuming an animal. It's more the way that the animal is treated and then dealt with that puts me off wanting to eat it anymore. Which it's a good time. It's a cool time. But basically,
what made you stop?
It's really funny, actually. My mum said, I'm going to be a vegetarian. Do you want to try doing it with me? And I went, yeah, okay. So
Fantastic story. Just because your mum peer pressure. I'm joking. It's not peer pressure, but
no, she was just looking for somebody else to do it.
the device what the dude rolls in does remind me of a device from the teleporter from The Fly. You know, the 1980s Fly.
Yes. It reminded me of something as well. I'm trying to remember what it reminded me of, because it's like this weird giant like pyramid structure, like a glass pyramid. What is it reminding me of? Oh, it's the you know, in The Good Place when they're getting judged by that dude, and he's like, I'm going to see if you guys were, and he locks himself inside this like chamber, like this triangle chamber thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What was it? I have no idea. I can't find it searching Good Place show triangle, so I don't know what it's called. But that's what it reminded me of, that thing. In that
have you noticed Google is getting increasingly difficult to navigate these days? Because you know, before you would search for that and you get it in like a second result, but now it's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, so I'm not going to bother.
It depends. I don't really Google that many things anymore, really, to be fair. Like, I've got most of my stuff bookmarked, or I've got it, like, I only use the browser on my phone to go into BBC News, which I've got pre-saved, so it just whenever I open up the browser, it goes on to BBC News, and then when I go onto my computer, everything autofills. So if I'm going to YouTube, I just need to press Y, and then YouTube loads up. Or if I'm going onto Facebook, it's just F, and then Facebook's there. Or ITV, it's I. Like, because the internet is just 6 websites now. I'm never actively like Googling anything unless it's like a random question, how many ducks is there in a lake?
Actually, that's a good point. How many ducks is there in a lake?
Depends on the lake, I guess.
7. 7 in
at
all
any
lakes
given
at any time.
Yeah. Yeah, there'd never be more. But yeah.
I never use Google much either because I don't need to. It's weird how shrunken the internet is these days. It's just like I only use only 3 social media sites really.
Yeah, it's a weird place. The internet now. Like I use YouTube, but not as much as I used to. I use Reddit, but not as much as I used to. I use Netflix, but not as much as I used to. I use there's just a bunch of sites that aren't as good as they used to be anymore.
Good stuff.
It's a miserable time. Yeah, it's really cool. But the episode continues as the Doctor discovers that Dastari wants to give the Androgum lady power of time travel, and he's like, "That's a terrible idea. What are you doing that for?" And he's like, "It's a pretty cool idea, I think." And he then goes away and talks to the Sontarans, and the Sontarans like, "How long's the plan gonna take?" And he's like, "I don't know, like an episode at least." And they start arguing, and then the Doctor gets into a conversation with another Sontaran, and that Sontaran's like, "I think I've made a mistake," and they have a bit of a back and forth, but nothing is happening plot wise, and also the Sontaran is melting. That's something that needs to be he is his face is squint, and the mask is all warped and gross looking. It looks terrible. This episode is a big stinker, but it continues on nevertheless.
The mask feels like it was an old prop, but in the DVD subtitles, the info text, it says it was a brand new prop because the old props were damaged or whatever. So this is a new prop, but it's obviously not built very well.
That's because they spent £300 on sunglasses and £5 on the masks.
Oh my god. The basic plan is, the idea is that the guy is trying to push the girl into time travel because it's basically his invention that the device to make her more human. It's like, oh my god, look what she can do.
Why don't the Sontarans just give their time travel technology?
Who gives a shit? I don't think this element of the episode, the whole time travel element, was very well thought out, because it feels like Robert Holmes just wanted to write stuff about being a vegetarian. That's the only thing that's going on here. It's only subtext.
It's such a weird choice to have Sontarans in a story like that as well, because they're not really famous for being meat-eating monsters. It's never really established what their diet is, but I imagine it would be a pretty processed, pre-made clone-based diet. So it would not really be we have farms. It would be oh no, it's all plant-based protein stuff. I would imagine the Sontarans themselves could even be vegetarians. I think that'd be a fun twist on the Sontarans.
Yeah,
is that they actually don't eat meat, which makes them just a strange villain to have in. There's not really many flesh-eating monsters when it comes to Doctor Who, which is why I guess they introduced the Androgums, but the Androgums are just people. They're not distinct enough to really be a compelling villain. Yeah, they're not. There's nothing interesting about them as it comes for a monster.
And they introduce Oscar and Anita, the two people running around Spain or whatever, and the whole analogy of them being hunters. Well, the Sontarans are also hunters, so it feels like there could be some sort of thread going on there. That maybe they're just like the Sontarans, hunting for no reason or whatever. But there's no subtext involved.
No.
there was just one theme going on that's like eating meat is bad. Okay, so that's the only thing that's going on here.
Yeah, which I mean, they're not wrong. If you eat meat, you are a lesser being.
I agree.
But yeah, it's hard to squeeze 120 minutes out of that. 40, 80, 90, 100, 120 minutes. In a Doctor Who story. It's cool.
Good stuff. I'm glad this was a 3-parter, you know.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad it was a 3-parter instead of a 6-parter, but at the same time, it's just a 6-parter.
Yeah.
Anyway, the episode continues as we go to the only scene worth watching in the entire episode, which is Patrick Troughton yelling at a Sontaran. As an attempt to try and escape. I think it's some clever thinking in Patrick Troughton's Doctor, where he's like, they're going to like perform surgery on me right now, but if I can get this Sontaran to fight me, he'll have to undo my bonds, and then I can just kind of run away. It's a really fun back and forth where the Sontaran has to kind of like fight his own personal honor with like the mission, and the Doctor trying to manipulate him into letting him go. It is my favorite scene, and literally the only good scene in the remaining 15 minutes of the episode.
I do love it when the Doctor tries to use his brain to try and get out of a situation rather than just using a sonic screwdriver. Like, yeah, of course, challenging a Sontaran to a duel is a good idea. And would have probably led to an interesting scene if the Sontaran actually accepted the duel, but instead of just having a Doctor just lie there all episode.
Yep, it's great. It's really cool. It's really great and really cool.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the plan for the surgery is to try and get the knowledge of like time travel, isn't it? You
are wrong.
Okay.
The surgery is to get the symbiotic DNA out of the Doctor to allow the Androgum to travel in the TARDIS, because they have a symbiotic relationship with the TARDIS. For whatever reason, it makes no sense.
It's one of those things that is introduced into the lore. I'm not sure if this is the first episode it's introduced into the lore, but it definitely doesn't keep up, because when Clara and me get a TARDIS in the end of series 9, none of them are Time Lords, but they can still fly TARDIS perfectly fine. So it's interesting. This whole subplot is from a previous draft that Holmes did for the 5 Doctors. He quit the 5 Doctors because basically at that point it was just like a massive checklist. So you have to have all the 5 Doctors, you have to have 7 companions, you have to have Cybermen, Daleks, a Master, and it just overbeared him, so that's why he quit the project. But his 5 Doctors script would have included a Cyberman attempting to perform surgery on a 2nd Doctor to try and find out the source of regeneration so they can take it for themselves.
That makes a lot more sense.
Which makes me think of the Time Lords. Oh, sorry, the Cybermen are now Time Lords. In the Chris Chibnall Doctor Who, anyway.
The Master's Cyber Lord. Did they ever get an official name? The Time Lord Cybermen? The Cyber Lords, I think, is what they should be called.
Time Lord. I think.
Did they ever get
Cyber Masters? Cyber Masters.
Oh, that's a worse name than Cyber Lords. Cyber Lord is cool.
But I didn't know this initial idea for the 5 Doctors, and it makes sense that Chibnall was like, as a kid, like, oh my god, that sounds like a great idea. Maybe I can keep it in my back pocket for if I ever run Doctor Who. So I think Chris Chibnall must have heard it and reused the idea, which is fine. You can reuse ideas, it's perfectly fine. I know people would see that and think, oh, Chris Chibnall has no original ideas. But nobody has original ideas. It's basically
there's no such thing.
It was like the same 7 stories told over and over and over again. So it's it's just things we use to distract ourselves from the fact that we're self-aware on a planet and we're doomed to eternal damnation. But we then
we then cut to a terrible, terrible scene of Colin Baker running into spying on the house with the Androgums in it. And this entire scene is just eating meat is wrong. The scene, it's cannibal Androgum guy talking about how we treat animals and we load them up and we overfeed them and stuff them, and they even get scared when they're going to the slaughterhouse because they know they're going to die. And all of this is true. It's just not relevant to the plot. And it's so ham-fisted, and like it's so blatantly obvious what the episode is trying to make you understand, make you believe. It's not handled like you can introduce a meat-eating metaphor easily. Yeah. Or I say easily, you can introduce a meat-eating metaphor into your story if you want that to be the crux and make that a driving plot point. But this has got nothing to do with the symbiotic relationship between a Time Lord and his TARDIS. Yeah. Like there's no connection between these two elements of the story at all, which is why it just kind of falls flat and you're not interested in it.
Yeah, it's just the guy is hungry and he wants to eat humans. That's all that's going on here, and it's. In the original, one of the original drafts for his scripts, the description of cooking a human was much more implicit. Here it's kind of toned down a bit. I imagine it's because maybe they were thinking of it being too dark for kids, but it's still a dark subject matter. Cannibalism.
It didn't help them anyway. It didn't help them. Like they should have just gone all in because they got in trouble anyway. So they should have just included everything. Like.
But yeah, obviously he's just a hungry dude and he wants to eat humans, and he's wondering why humans don't eat humans. And well, we've seen Yellow Jackets, they do eat humans and they have a lovely time of it.
Yeah, except sometimes, unless you're like Coach Ben, in which case you're not having a lovely time at all. But yeah, then the doctor like falls off the stool that he's standing on in a really weird way, and the lady like scans the horizon. She hears him fall, and so she scans the horizon. She doesn't look to where the sound came from, which is directly below the window. It's another gap in logic in this episode. It's so bad.
Like she's just expecting like a 20-foot person to be standing there,
or like an army of people to be like across the hills, like.
But like the whole stool falling under the doctor's weight because he's kind of on the edge of it and it's tipping over. It feels like a Carry On film at this point, where I've never watched a Carry On film. I've said this before, but it feels like the type of slapstick humor you would see in a Carry On film where somebody falls over. And you expect like a laugh track to play along with it, honestly.
Yeah, it's bad. And then speaking of bad, the episode continues as the doctor just goes to sit in a field with the companions and the two really boring people that don't need to be in the story at all. And they just have a little chat, just sitting in the field. They just have a wee gab about what's going on. And it's again terrible, but it's just they come up with a plan that Perry's going to go off to the house and to like distract them or something, and they're going to go the other way, and they're going to leave the guy that likes to eat moths to just sit in the field because he has literally nothing to do. And then by the time they get to the house, they send the lady away as well because these two characters are pointless to the entire goddamn thing.
Oh, don't worry, they'll be back next week. I'm excited.
Great.
But yeah, this whole scene is just introducing the concept that I guess he's between acting jobs. Maybe he's not good enough as an actor, so his career is going downhill.
Terrible. He's not good at acting.
Yeah, I think that's the intent. And meanwhile, he's running a restaurant, his friend's restaurant or something, and that's context for next week. So
great. I'm glad that you clarified that, because that's going to be a plot point that I don't remember by the time next week comes over, because I'm so goddamn sick of this episode. It sucks. But then we go to the second Doctor having surgery, and this was like kind of a dark scene, I thought, where the Doctor's getting like injected and loaded up, and he's begging his old friend to stop doing this and like what's gone wrong with him, and then the guy pulls out like this giant saw and starts approaching his head, and it's like just before he starts cutting open his skull, then he hears the noise from, I think it's Perry that makes the distracting noise, or it's the girl in the pink dress, or somebody makes a noise and it distracts them, and they're like, wait, stop, what's going on out there, let's go investigate. But like you know, this is some great, I think, edge of your seat if you're like a little kid tension where you're like, oh my god, are they going to cut open the Doctor's head right now? Which again, it's kind of dark, but I think it toes the line where you could kind of get away with this. And I kind of dig the edginess that brings.
You pointing out, but this is technically kind of the Doctor's old friend here. I do wish that relationship had been built more last week's episode, you know, like maybe you're just sitting down with a cup of tea and we're discussing their past together or something before.
Yeah,
we
they
get
really
into...
only have like half a scene before they start fighting. Like,
yeah, that's a weakness of this episode again. The villains are just so one note. And there's 5 of them. There's 5 villains in this episode. And all of them are just one note, not interesting. You could lose with Sontarans. Honestly, you could lose everyone.
Yeah, just don't air it. Just don't air this episode. But yeah, Perry then meets the Lady Androgum and also Cannibal Androgum, as she's like bumped in to like spy on them or whatever her actual part of this plan is, and they're like, let's eat her. But Lady Androgum is like, oh, no, we can't eat her just yet. We might eat her later on, but right now I've got a suspicion that she's here to distract us or something.
Yeah.
You know, there's something weird going on here.
Perry uses the disguise. She's basically doing like a census survey or whatever. She's like, how many bedrooms do you have?
Yeah.
And the Lady Androgum is trying to read Perry's mind, and she's like, I can read that she knows of the Doctor, so we're going to plan this out so we can wheel the Doctor out. And they do wheel, well, jumping ahead a bit because this is uninteresting, but they do wheel the Doctor out, and nothing comes from the idea of her reading Perry's mind, which it feels like it could have been an interesting twist where, you know, of course Perry doesn't know what the second Doctor looks like, so of course she wouldn't recognize the second Doctor, so the plan is ruined in the first place. But it doesn't really come to anything in this episode. It feels like there should have been like a conclusion to the reading the mind part, but there's nothing that comes from it, honestly.
Yeah, it's just more garbage on this garbage episode.
But of course, we do get introduced to Patrick Troughton on his wheelchair. During breaks, he would actually nap in this wheelchair during breaks in rehearsal when he wasn't needed. Fraser and Colin would sneak up behind him, tip it backwards, and startle him. On the 5th day of the shoot, Troughton turned to Fraser Hines and said, "You're supposed to be in my gang. We should be ganging up against Colin." Which again, just sounds like they all had a lovely time filming this episode. Just
yeah, I'm glad they all got along. It sounds like it was a fun time making a garbage set of TV. But yeah, the Doctor, Colin Baker, before this falls down a hole at some point, and we all laughed and clapped, and it was very silly.
Yeah, fat man fall.
But they end up finding the giant weird pyramid thing, and they're like, oh, what's going on here? Until they get cornered by the 2 giant Sontaran not twins, and that's the last time we see them of this episode. Perry then also gets like stalked on by a creepy cannibal guy who likes licking his lips, and he's being all creepy and kind of rapey, and then he like chases her, and the episode ends with her falling over the air onto the ground, and then the guy like climbs on top of her, and he's like towering above her, and he's like, you're so pretty, and it's honestly, it made me really uncomfortable as an ending. It was a really gross ending. It's also the second ending in a row of a man just being on top of Perry.
Pretty much, yeah. Second story in a row where there's rape connotations, because also we did Caves of Androzani, which was also written by Robert Holmes, and the whole deal with the villain of that episode was he basically wanted to rape Perry.
Yeah, the whole time, yeah.
And of course we started out the year on another rape episode with the Time Meddler, where we
they were straight up. Yeah, they just straight up like actually did rape her. Yeah.
We see the start of a rape of a woman, which was wild to discover that classic Doctor Who did that.
Yeah, it was. It's a weird, upsetting theme. of Classic Who so far. But yeah, it's this ending I really don't like. It makes me uncomfortable. I think it's a really bad cliffhanger. I think this story in general sucks. I really didn't like this episode. It was a big stinker. 0 out of 10. There's one good scene in the entire episode. 44 minutes, and there's one good scene, and it lasts maybe 30 seconds. Like.
Yeah, nothing much happens in this episode apart from them trying to connect the two storylines together, and it just goes on and on. Nothing interesting of note, really. Yeah,
no, there's like, I'm amazed we've been talking for as long as we have been talking, but that's we've just been going off on tangents because this episode is so boring. There's nothing, there's no substance to talk about. And when it comes to the episode,
just Robert Holmes is just so into the theme of meat eating is bad, and it's there's no nuance to the theme. There's nothing interesting to the theme. It's just scene after scene of people wanting to eat other people. That's basically it.
Especially like you could do so much more interesting things with it. Like you could have a planet of people where they've all become like these gross, like obese monsters or something, or they just have no care for human life at all, or you could do like a twist on like fast food chains and just have this like mass-produced thing. But it requires just writing a completely different story because the Sontarans have nothing to do with it. The cannibal people have nothing to do with it. The two doctors really have nothing to do with the metaphor that you're trying to include into this story. And you know, it makes me think of like, you know, the episode in season 4 with the fat. And that whole the whole episode's like a metaphor for diet pills and stuff like that, you know, and body image and things. And it ties in to the story because the aliens are using it to farm to get their little wee guys, you know. And, you know, it's a metaphor that ties in and works, and it's cool. It's a cute little fun episode, because they thought about what they were writing.
What I like about that episode as well is that's not even the main plot of the episode. Is about the Doctor and Donna reuniting. It's kind of like background kind of stuff happening because at the end of the day, the story isn't that strong. It's not that important to the story to tell.
It's just a cute little guy episode. Look at the cute little guy.
And it's mainly just used as a less interesting story to set up the Doctor and Donna reuniting, which this episode, the concept of a future Doctor having to go back in time to save a previous Doctor is interesting, but again, they just don't do anything with it because they haven't met yet. The Doctor only just arrived to where the second Doctor is. And
it's insane that
90
we're
minutes
80
in.
minutes.
I know.
Yeah, you know, and they have not met at all. Like, it's brutal. It's brutal.
Last episode was alright. The first half was pretty decent. This episode was no redeeming qualities. I am interested to find out what you think of the next episode because it is probably one of the most insane Doctor Who episodes we might have covered in a while. So it's going to be a fun one, I think. It's going to be a fun one either in a bad way or a so good it's bad or so bad it's good way.
Well, you've got me excited to watch it because honestly, this episode really made me dislike this story and made me be like, I can't wait for this to be over. But if the next episode is completely wackadoo, then I'm looking forward to it.
And you know, this was the biggie of Colin Baker's run, the one I chose for a reason because it's a multi-Doctor story. There's not much else in his first season to pick from, which is kind of depressing that Colin Baker has such a bad run of episodes, honestly.
Yeah, he's just, again, you know, it's just bad luck. You know, just the right guy at the wrong time type deal. But it's let's wrap up this episode. So thank you very much for listening. If you made it this far through this this slog through the two Doctors, I very much appreciate it. You can find this podcast on YouTube at Who Watches Who Pod, where you can watch it in video form and see our faces. It's also available in audio form anywhere you listen to podcasts. There's a lot of links in the description. Why don't you leave us a comment on our Facebook page at facebook.com/whowatcheswho or on Twitter at twitter.com @watchesdoctor, and tell us what you think of Colin Baker as the Doctor or the two Doctors, or simply leave a comment below below on YouTube. And if you're listening onto an audio platform, why don't you leave us a review? It does a long way in actually helping it get exposure for the show. That's basically how the algorithms work on Spotify and like Apple Podcasts and stuff like that. The more reviews and the more positive feedback you've got for the show, the more chances it has of recommending it to other people, because right now our download numbers are really good, but the best way for us to grow those download numbers is for the people that are downloading it to leave a review. So if you could do that, that'd be really cool, and I will read them out at the end of the month in the news podcast if I can find them, or just tell me that you've sent them by sending us an email at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com, and I'll be sure to read that out as well. Thank you very much, and in the meantime we will be back next week as we finish off the Two Doctors story. So, until then, I guess. But bye. Yeah, I've totally lost what I was saying. Bye.